Sunak is losing votes to Farage's Reform UK amid Tory rows over migration. I'm going to read into this exclusive from iNews, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an exclusive from iNews with the headline: Now Rishi Sunak is losing votes to Farage's Reform UK amid the Tory rows over migration. A new poll by BMG Research shows that Labour are on course for a heavy landslide victory over the Conservatives, with gains from Reform UK. Now, as always, what we say before we talk about these things, guys, caveat, these are polls. Don't take polls always too seriously, but they may give us indications about where things may be at the next general election. Every now and again, I like to do a video and talking a bit about these polls because they may give us a bit more insight into what may or may not happen at the next general election. So always, like I say with these polls, guys, don't take it so seriously. Take it with a pinch of salt. It is only one poll. Doesn't mean to say it's the be all and end all. It doesn't mean it's all over for the Conservatives. Just because the vast majority of polls saying it's going to be a landslide win for Labour, or Labour are the most likely going to be the likely majority, doesn't mean that they are going to be a shoehorn for it. Things can change between now and the next general election, so always bear that in mind. So, what do I think of these numbers, guys? So, obviously, it seems it seems like a very obvious polling so far. We're obviously in the Christmas period right now, where it's already struggling right now but you can see there just from this voting intention there that still 27% of people are still intentionally going to vote Labour. Now, obviously, as I said, it is one poll, but still 27% of people are still not seeing that what's happening in their lives is a direct result of the Conservative government there. You can see there also 43% there on Labour, so that has not changed. Lib Dems 10%, Reform 11%, and the Green Party 5%. So obviously people are less likely to vote for Lib Dem, Reform, and Green, and they're more likely to vote for the two main parties because they're the ones that obviously are the ones that are going to be the ones in power. But there is a possibility. There is still that possibility, and I'm still not going to refuse to rule it out that we could end up with a Labour-Lib Dem coalition, possibly, because there are many people out there who simply don't trust Keir Starmer and don't trust the Labour Party with powers. It has been 13 years. A lot has changed since then in Labour. And I know, obviously, some people are still not completely comfortable with them, so that is also the possibility there. So perhaps there maybe Lib Dems might have an opportunity there, have a shout if they push hard enough there. Reform UK obviously is the one I think we're going to be talking a little bit about as well here today. Obviously, Reform have made it very clear. Richard Tice, the leader, has made it very clear that he has no intention of not moving his candidates aside come at the general election against Conservative voters, which will badly damage Conservative voters if they do that. But we'll have to wait and see, obviously. But the thing is that how much effect of Reform going to really have on the spectrum? Are they even going to have an MP? No, not with the first past the post system. It's not. So I really don't have much hope there. Now, the Green Party, they still have one Green MP in Caroline Lucas, who is sadly stepping down. The statistics and analysis that I've seen is telling me that they're looking to try to gain at least three Green to have at least a total of 3 Green MPs at the next general election. It's a big ask for them, and that they are, out of all the parties there, the ones I'm going to be more coinciding to favour. In terms of personal, I think the Greens, they say a lot of the right things, and they seem to come across as a party that seems like a safe pair of hands, and it's just such a shame that they don't really have much of an influence because of the system that we have is kind of rigged against them. So I'm hoping that in the future, when we have proportional representation, the Greens will have a much bigger say in the future of our country. So I would definitely keep your eye out for them. And obviously at the bottom there it says 4% others. So let's read into it now. So the Conservatives face a growing threat from Reform UK after support from the party founded by Nigel Farage has hit a record high in new polls. Some voters on the right appear to be abandoning the Conservative after multiple high-profile rows over immigration, which have led to more public seeing migration as their top concern. So essentially what's happening here is that it's just the media. This is the media manipulating the Conservative voters here, because they have been painted the picture that it is because of migration, which is why everything is going to poop pretty much in the whole country. Everything is all being painted as it's all immigrants' fault. And the problem is that these Conservative voters are believing it. They believe in it. They believe what the right-wing medias are telling them because they trust these newspapers or news outlets or wherever they get their source of information from. They trust them to believe that immigration is the #1 priority in this country. And they believe immigration is the reason why we have bad NHS, bad schools are overcrowded, or hospitals are overcrowded, or crime is up because of immigration. These are all the things that they're going to start painting the narrative around. It's all because of immigrants. All because of immigrants. All these problems that are happening in our country. Paints the narrative. People believe it. And that's the problem here. So, when you have that being fed into them, and you see that the Conservatives don't look like they're going to have the Rwanda plan going, they're obviously going to turn their back on them and saying, well, we're not going to trust Labour, but we're not going to vote for you, so we're going to vote for Reform UK. Hence why you're seeing a lot of people moving from Conservative to Reform from the looks of this poll. The latest BMG Research poll for I found that Labour's leader, Tories, has extended to 16 points, with the governing party on 27% and the opposition on 43%. Reform UK is third on 11%, at the best ever performance in the BMG polling, with the Liberal Democrats is on 10%. The findings are seen as some Conservative MPs as evidence that Rishi Sunak is failing to convince the right-wing voters that he's handling the issue that they care about. One backbencher said none of this comes as a surprise. Sadly, immigration is quickly becoming the dominant issue for the majority of Conservative voters. If these voters believe the government, and more specifically the Prime Minister, is incapable of addressing their concerns, it's hardly surprising they're looking elsewhere. It comes amidst speculation that Mr Farage could stage a political comeback and replace Richard Tice as Reform UK's party leader after his stink in the jungles. ITV's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Mr Farage is currently in the party's honorary president. Pressed earlier this month on whether he could take over as leader, Mr Tice said Mr Farage made it clear that he didn't want to stand in a first-past-the-post election, before adding, let's wait and see. So essentially, Richard Tice there is basically saying he's happy to step aside to bring in Nigel Farage if it means that Reform UK get a bigger share of the pie when it comes to the votes sharing at the next general election, is what he's saying. The former UKIP leader hinted at his hopes of returning to a frontline politics during conversations with campmates in the jungle. When discussing whether he had ambitions to run for Prime Minister or Tory party leader, he said, never say never. Oh, we don't want to see him as that. No, we don't want to see that. No. So these are some other statistics here from the source from the BMG. Again, remember, take this with a pinch of salt. So asking here, is net migration too high? 63% say it's too high. 12% say they don't know. 6% says it's too low, and 18% says it's about right. Important caveat here, just to point out, we have one of the lowest intakes of migration in the whole of Europe. So that's a very important statistic to add in there. So migration is, we are not taking anywhere near enough migrants. And the reason why that they're not making anything use of themselves, like they're not contributing to society and the economy, is because we have laws in place that deny them the right to work while they sit in hotels, barges and whatnot. So that's why, and that's because the Conservatives changed the law on that. So it's a very important caveat to make there. So what should be prioritised? So what are people thinking here? So 36% are saying the economic growth. 25% of Tory voters believe it's economic growth. Labour voters are saying it's 52%. 52% of Labour voters are saying it's economic growth there. They're saying as what should be prioritised. Reducing immigration. 37% believe that overall. 56% of Tory voters think that reducing immigration is the bigger priority. Labour voters only 25%. And then there's 25% of those who don't know, and 2% said they prefer not to say. Now on tax, and they say, do you pay enough tax? 43% say they pay too much. About right is 27%. 9% says too little. 16% don't know, and 5% will prefer not to say. So a vast majority of people believe that they're paying too much tax, and the main reason they would say that is simply because of their bills. That ties into the whole cost of living crisis with inflation. All that is what's tied into that, the reason why people think they're paying too much tax. If inflation came down and people's necessities and bills weren't too high. That statistic would probably be a lot less. But because people are struggling right now, which is why they want anything and everything to be easier for them. So that's probably why they're saying that. How should physical headroom be used? So it's an interesting one. It's quite a mixture bag on this one. So 22% say cut taxes, 21% say public spending, 35% say mixture, 21% they don't know. So it's essentially, there's not a direct one here. The most say a mixture of some. I'm glad that there's still quite a lot of people are saying on public spending. Public spending is a priority. Public spending should be a priority there. But it's quite a mixed bag there. So some people are saying this, some people are saying that. Cutting taxes, I don't think cutting taxes is a solution. I do think public spending is a priority. But that's just me. So the proportion of voters saying that immigration is the most important issue facing the country and has risen up to 12%, up from 7% in the summer. The public is divided on whether the government should be prioritising controlling migration over growing the economy, with Tory supporters in favour of a focus on immigration and Labour backers preferring growth as a priority. But voters of all parties agree that immigration is too high, with 63% saying that the current level of net migration, 672,000 people, is excessive. Again, I have to stress this. We have one of the lowest intakes of migration in the whole of Europe. And here's another caveat as well. The reason why it's so high is because we've recently been taking in lots of those from Ukraine, because this may not surprise you. For those of you who did not know, there's a war going on right now, and it's still happening out there. Even though it's not in the headlines, it's still a very important story. Very important that people remember that. So we've had some intakes from Ukraine, and we've also had intakes from Hong Kong as well. So we've had them been coming in. So that is important to highlight that factor in terms of these numbers as well. So the BMG's Robert Schruckers has said, all this is fueling support for Reform UK, who have broken into double digits for the first time in our poll tracker. Just over a year ago, they were in the low single digits, but Sunak is now facing a serious challenge on his right flank. Strikingly, among 1 in 5 who voted Conservative 2019 say they now intend to vote Reform, just up from just 1 in 10 in October. Oliver Wright, also BMG, added that the jump in support from Reform UK will have been fueled by Suella Braverman's resignation in the latest net migration figures, with Labour's lead on the issue of immigration also increasing. The views of the autumn statement delivered by Jeremy Hunt last month are evenly divided, but it does not appear to have boosted Conservative fortunes, with 43% of people still saying they are paying too much tax despite the cut to national insurance. Oliver White of BMG said Rishi Sunak will have been hoping for a polling boost following the autumn statement last, but if anything, the reverse has happened. His electoral prospects look even bleaker. If our number were repeated in a general election, we'd be looking at a 1999-style landslide victory for Starmer, with the Conservatives dropping well below 200 seats, a remarkable reversal since 2019. The BMG Research interviewed a representative sample of 1,502 Great British adults online between the 28th and the 30th of November. BMG's members are part of British Polling Council and abide by their rules. So what's the analysis saying, guys, on this? So, even as the Conservatives struggle to close the polling gap with Labour, they have consoled themselves with the lack of credibility threat from the right. The lack of decency showing from Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party, and the total collapse of UKIP suggests that tackling to the centre to win back voters from Labour and the Liberal Democrats could be a viable strategy for Rishi Sunak. But with immigration the ultimate hot-button issue for the right-wing voters firmly in the headlines in recent weeks, Reform is starting to surge. Make no mistake, if the party stays at its current level of 11% when the general election comes around, it will not pick up a single common seat. But it could sap enough Tory support to cost Mr Sunak a significant number of constituencies, allowing Labour to come through the middle and the right-wing vote split. And things could get worse, not at least if Nigel Farage replaces the relatively unknown Richard Tice as Reform leader. The Conservative MPs on the right of the party want the Prime Minister to double down on a tough stance on migration to appeal directly to those voters who have drifted towards reform. Number 10 insiders prefer a different approach. They emphasise that illegal migration has fallen remarkably this year, despite the failure of the Rwanda deportation plan to get off the ground. If only Tory backbenchers would stop focusing on the latter, they argue the public mood on migration would improve. Guys, it's really important for me to emphasise that, again, the manipulation of the media is also playing a factor into this too. It's really important to stress that why people think that immigration is a high priority. It's easy for some of you maybe listening to this thinking, that it isn't the be all to end all, and there are other issues in this country. And you're right. The cost of living crisis, the National Healthcare Service, our crumbling NHS, our poor police force. There's all, and among them, just among many other major issues, then migration is seen as the bigger issue. And it's been backering on about immigration. It's been kind of going on and on and on, pretty much since. This has been going on and on and on, pretty much since Brexit. You know, it was supposed to be done and dusted when we left the EU, and that hasn't happened. So there's also that. There's a lot of anger still there, because people were expecting the numbers to drop when we left the EU, and that has not happened. Because that's what one of the main premises of leaving the European Union was, what it was supposed to be. So where does this leave us in all seriousness? What's really important is that when whatever happens at the next general election, reforms of the electoral system, reforms of our media, needs to be some priorities, as well as the cost of living crisis, fixing our national healthcare service, making it a better system for our state schools. There are going to be many issues, and there's not going to be a lot of money, because the Conservative Party are setting up the so-called next Labour government, who are coming into a really bad position in terms of the economy, based off the Jeremy Hunt's last budget statement. So it's not good at all, guys. It's really not. But what do you guys make of this? What do you guys make of this poll? Like I said, take it with a pinch of salt, as you always should do. Do you think Nigel Farage is going to return as a Reform leader, UK leader? And what impact, if any, will he have at the general election if he does? Do you think that Reform could push enough votes to get an MP in? What do you guys make of the Green Party's progress, or the Lib Dems? If you have any thoughts on them, and let me know in the comment section down below as well. Is this Labour's time to come to power? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, of course, to hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media, and hit that bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I upload another video, or when I go live. And if you want to financially support me, you can do so by buying me a coffee or joining me on Patreon. Take care as always, and I hope to catch you all very soon.